It starts with the smell. Not rot, not blood, not diesel or fish or any of the normal ocean stinks you learn to tune out. It's like the air right after a lightning strike. Sharp, metallic, charged, mixed with the cold, mineral breath of a flooded cave. A dry smell that somehow feels wet. It cuts straight through the recycled air of the habitat, through the iodine and plastic and stale sweat. That's how I know I'm slipping under. That's how I know the gallery's open. My name's Layla. I worked as a sonar tech on a research habitat pinned to the side of the Mariana Trench. If you picture some high-tech sci-fi base, don't. Think rusted steel bolted to the skeleton of an old Navy module, cables like intestines, everything humming and sweating, and one bad weld away from disaster. I've spent 3 years down here in shifts. 3-month hitches, a few weeks topside, then back down. Long enough that I know every bolt head over my bunk, every bubble in the paint, every condensation trail that crawls down the bulkhead when the humidity spikes. Up there, people learn their bedroom ceilings. Down here, I've become a student of the hull. I've traced patterns in the corrosion, a fork-shaped stain, a chipped line, a cluster of pitted bubbles. I give them names in my head during the long, insomniac stretches. The fork, the spine, the eye, stupid little constellations of rust. Astronomy of the inert. My only defense when the paralysis hits. Textbook, the station medic told me the first time I tried to explain it. REM atonia intrusion. Your brain wakes up before your body. Classic sleep paralysis. Common in isolated environments. Stress, circadian disruption, the whole package. You're fine. The sensation of a presence? A hallucination, Layla. Your system misfiring. Dreams leaking into wakefulness. The crushing weight on my chest. Your diaphragm's still relaxed. You're hyper-aware of your own breathing mechanics. It feels wrong, that's all. All in my head. So comforting. So completely, catastrophically wrong. The process is always the same. A familiar arbitral. First, the smell, snaking through the bunk like someone cracked a hatch to a thunderstorm in a cave. Then, under the constant low thrum of pumps and fans, I hear something new, a deeper vibration, a pitch that lives in the roots of my teeth instead of my ears. Like a distant ship's screw, only slower, more deliberate. It rises from nowhere, then settles into a steady hum that feels like it's holding me in place. And my body just stops obeying. I'm not talking about being tired. I mean, 1 second I'm on my side scrolling through logs. The next I'm face up, eyes open, locked in. A mind poured into a bronze diving bell. I can't twitch a finger. Can't roll my eyes. The little emergency light over the hatch burns a dull red, painting the bolts and seams overhead. My rust constellations stare back. That's when I know I'm in the prison. And that's when I know I'm not alone in it. I can't see it. That's one of the rules. Whatever's in there with me lives just outside the slice of my vision. The bunk is a coffin, my head's pinned straight. I can't turn to look down the narrow cabin, can't check the doorway, can't see the porthole with its round eye of absolute black beyond. I can only stare at the fork, the spine, the eye, and feel the temperature in the room drop. Not a breeze. There's no breeze this deep, just an absence. The air itself goes hollow, like something is drinking the warmth out of it. And then I hear the breathing. Not mine. I can see my chest barely rising, the thin station blanket trembling with each shallow, robotic inhale. This other breathing is slow. Vet. Each exhale ends in a faint, bubbling gurgle, like someone blowing through a straw into a bucket of water. It sounds wrong, inefficient, like lungs that were never meant for air, trying to remember how to use it. Then comes the wetness. A single drop, icy cold, hits me at the hairline above my right temple. It slides down into my hair with agonizing precision. Another follows, then another. A slow, steady leak, always from the same spot above me. Drip, drip, drip. The drops don't spread like sweat. They fall in a line, each one landing on the exact same patch of skin, like it's marking me, branding me. When I finally claw my way out of the concrete of my body, my heart racing, mouth dry, limbs tingling with pins and needles, my hair on that side of my head is always wet. Not damp from sweat wet. Cold, sticky, smelling like ozone and drowned stone. Top side, you turn on a light and check the ceiling for a leak. Down here, 6.5 miles under the Pacific, the idea that something overhead is dripping is not comforting. You don't want to think about what's above you. You don't want to think about the kilometers of water, the pressure, the fact that one crack would turn you into a red mist before you even realized you were dead. But I still scrambled up, bumping my head on the bunk above, cursing as I slid out and stumbled to the tiny head at the end of the module. I flicked on the harsh LED strip and caught my reflection in the steel mirror. Ghost, wide eyes, pupils huge, skin sallow for months without real sunlight. Dark hair plastered to one side of my skull. The water beaded there, clinging to the strands. Thick, glistening, slightly viscous. When I raised my fingers and touched it, it tugged back like slow syrup. My fingers came away shining with two tacky, amber-tinged droplets. I brought them to my nose. They smelled like metal and something older than rust. Like the inside of a cracked, open rock that's been underwater for 1,000 years. And underneath it all, faint but real, that electric tang, like the air after a storm. The medic shrugged when I told him. Localized sweat, he said. Weird things happen with circulation during paralysis episodes. It can feel sticky. You're already primed to see it as, I don't know, paranormal gunk. Confirmation bias. Does sweat smell like a fucking thunderstorm? I asked. He smiled, the tired, not paid enough smile of everyone down here. You're under extreme stress. Your perception is skewed. And this place always smells weird. Brine, ozone from the equipment, lubricant off-gassing. It all blends. Brains don't leave residue, I said. Hallucinations don't follow me to the sink. He tapped his tablet. Write it down. Log it. We'll adjust your schedule. Try melatonin. Less coffee. No screens in the bunk. I wanted to choke him with his lanyard. Instead, I started sleeping with a towel over my pillow. That's the kind of rational shit you do when your world has gone irrational. You build little tests. You make rules. You control what you can. I folded a blue microfiber towel, laid it over the thin pillow, and lay down with my head under it like a kid hiding from monsters. If the towel's damp, I told myself, it's condensation or a leak. If it's dry and my hair's wet, then what, Layla? Then I know I'm not crazy. The next paralysis hit 3 nights later. Smell. Hum. That crushing, invisible gravity pinning my limbs. And the drip. Exact same spot. Exact same tempo. I stared at the eye, a tiny blister of bubbled paint overhead, while the drops hit my hidden temple. I could feel them gliding through the towel like it wasn't there. The towel made no difference. It might as well have been smoke. Drip. Seikin. Cold. Slow. In. The presence felt closer this time. Bigger. Like it was pressed almost flat against the ceiling, directly above me. Try to decide whether it fit. I could hear something else now, too. A soft, fibrous creak like wet rope twisting under tension, or old leather being flexed. A sound of something adjusting itself in cramped quarters. When I broke out of it, gasping, I ripped the towel off. Bone dry. The pillow was dry. My hair was soaked on that one side again. I stripped the pillowcase, sniffed it, checked the seams, ran my fingers along the welds of the overhead plate. Nothing. I slept in the acoustics bay the next day, head on my folded arms over the console, between shifts. The other tech, Hoon, nudged me awake with his elbow. You look like shit, he said, mouth full of ration bar. Thanks. You talked to Toe? That was the medic. Yeah, he says my brain's misfiring. Hoon snorted. All of ours are. He leaned back, headphones around his neck. Eyes on the screen, showing live feeds from the hydrophones strung along the trench wall. It's funny. Out there is the quietest place on Earth, and at the same time, it's never really silent. There's always something. The distant groan of tectonics. The hiss of microbubbles. The faint, faraway roar of storms a world above. Whale song, sometimes echoing down from blue water they'll never leave. Ships overhead like ghosts, their props a faint whoop whoop whoop. You get used to the signatures. You learn their handwriting. That day, between micronaps, I watched a strange pattern crawl up the waterfall display. A cluster of returns, tight, rhythmic. Too regular for random noise. Too deep for anything alive we'd cataloged. It looked deliberate. "What's that?" I asked, pointing. Hoon squinted. "Probably some equipment whine. One of the lower nodes has been funky for weeks." "It's coming from under us," I said. "Look at the depth markers." He shrugged. "Plenty of shit we don't know about down there." His casual tone made me irrationally angry. "We're bolted on the side of that shit," I snapped. "If something big coughs, we're confetti." He gave me a look. "You need sleep, Layla." He wasn't wrong. My hand shook when I lifted my coffee. My thoughts felt like they were moving through syrup. But under all that fatigue, something sharp and nauseous was taking root. The horror wasn't just the paralysis or the presence. It was the evidence, the mundane, physical details that refused to fade in daylight. The smell, the damp hair, that weird, rhythmic noise from below us. A drip is nothing. It's almost a joke, until you realize there's no pipe above you, no vent, no source, until you realize the ocean itself might be making contact. I lasted another week on caffeine and denial. Then the curiosity curdled into something else. I've been a passive exhibit in whatever the hell was happening. Something visiting my bunk like a gallery, studying me under the emergency light. Drip feeding me terror. I needed to see it. I needed proof, one way or the other. I needed to know if I was losing my mind or if something was bending the rules in this tin can. We don't exactly have Amazon delivery at 10,900 meters, but we do have cameras. Lots of them. The hab's more wired than a prison. I put in a request to reroute a spare internal cam to my cabin for personal security reasons. And because most of the command crew were exhausted and half checked out, nobody asked questions. I mounted it on the corner bracket near my feet, angled up toward the bunk. Gave it a clear view of me from the chest up and a chunk of overhead. It was a cheap little thing, old IR unit from one of the storage corridors. Grainy night vision, motion detection. Good enough. I linked it to my tablet, set it to start recording at the first sign of movement in the frame, which seemed like a joke considering the whole issue was me not being able to move, but whatever. I figured if a rat ran across my face in the middle of the night, I'd at least get a fun clip. That night, when a lightning cave smell slid into the room, something like relief actually went through me. Good, I thought, as the hum started up in my bones. Good, let's do it. Let's see you. Then the prison dropped. It's almost like being snapped into a cast. One moment free, the next encased. My breath went shallow. My tongue stuck to the roof of my mouth. The overhead light was off. Only the red glow of the emergency strip painting everything in submarine dusk. I listened. The station's usual noises faded. The fan over my head seemed to retreat. The pump vibrato that I'd stopped noticing long ago became thin, distant, and that other hum swelled, deeper, closer, like something enormous had just slid into position outside the hull. My skin went hot, then cold. The drip came right on cue, right temple, the exact same nerve dead spot. A bead of liquid hit, then oozed down into my hair. I wanted to smile. I wanted to scream. Instead, I lay there, happy, panicking meat, staring at the spine and the eye while whatever shared the room with me breathed badly in the dark. There was something else, too. A sense of weight above me. A shadow on my skin, if that makes sense. Like the feeling when someone leans over you while you're pretending to sleep. The air gets heavy. You just know. The fibrous creak came again, louder this time. Like tendons stretching. Like a door hinge that had never seen oil. In my head, I taunted it. Show off. Come crozer. Let's see the good side. Then the episode ended. It always does, like a switch flipping. You don't climb out of it. You're thrown. 1 second frozen. The next I'm lurching upright, gagging, clutching my chest. My hair slapped wetly against my neck. I didn't bother with lights. Didn't bother with the towel. I grabbed my tablet with shaking fingers, pulled up the feed buffer, and scrubbed back through the last 3 hours. Static, black, occasional green flicker as the IR tried to make sense of the dark. Then, at 3 hours, 17 minutes, and 22 seconds, a motion flag. The timeline bloomed gray. My own sleeping form filled the frame, curled under the blanket, face half turned toward the camera. The IR washed me out, turned me into a white, grainy corpse with black holes for eyes. I tapped play. At first, nothing. Just me breathing, chest rising in tiny increments, the blanket barely shifting. The timestamp clicked over. 3 hours, 17 minutes, and 23 seconds. 24, 25. At 26, something entered the frame from above. It didn't step into view. It extruded. A segment of darkness deeper than the already black ceiling pushed down into the IR field, resolving into shape as it descended. It was like watching a shadow decide to be three-dimensional. A limb, if you could call it that, unfolded. Too long, too jointed. It bent in a way that didn't make sense, not in gravity, not in air. A series of narrow segments, each angling at slightly the wrong place, like a centipede's leg turned inside out and stretched. The texture of it made my skin crawl. The IR rendered it in shades of matte gray, pitted and uneven, like the surface of deep-sea rock encrusted with tiny, shriveled anemones. Drops clung to it, catching the infrared with little bright points. The limb braced itself on the wall beside my bunk. More followed, sliding down out of the top of the frame. It didn't look like it was climbing down from the hatch or the ceiling plate. It looked like it was just coming through. Like there was a hole in the world up there only it could use. The torso, if that's what it was, never fully came into view. The bulk of it stayed out of frame, somewhere above the camera's field, but the suggestion of length was terrifying. It didn't fit in my mental picture of the cabin. It shouldn't have been able to fit in the habitat at all. Then it leaned closer. A head emerged. I paused the video without meaning to. My thumb just spasmed. His head was wrong. Long, tapering, a stretched teardrop hung upside down. The skin, if it was skin, looked dehydrated, like a mushroom left in the sun, crinkled and dead. There were no visible eyes in the IR, just 2 shallow depressions where a human skull would have kept them. No nose, either, just faint suggestion of ridges. But the mouth. The mouth was a horizontal gash that started where you'd expect a mouth to be and just kept going, carved halfway down the length of the head. No leaps, just a line, slightly parted. IR turned the inside into a featureless black. I hit play again. It descended another 30 centimeters, enough that its non-face hovered directly above my face on the screen. Its limbs adjusted with tiny, jerky motions, like frames removed from a stop-motion movie. A correction here, a twist there. Insect-like but slower, too careful. Then from that slit, something unspooled. At first I thought it was smoke. A thin rope of deeper black seeped out, then sagged as gravity took it. It was a tongue, but not for tasting. It was a conduit. It extended, glistening in IR as the droplets on its length reflected the light, and came to rest just over my forehead. A bead formed at the tip. It swelled. Thick, heavy. Then it fell. On screen, my paralyzed body didn't flinch as the drop hit the exact spot at the hairline where I'd felt it. The tongue didn't retract. Another bead formed. Another fell. A slow, constant secretion, each drop leaving a brighter smear on my skin as it cooled. The string between its mouth and my face never fully broke. It dangled, a wet, glistening cord that grew and shrank with every slight movement. I watched myself lie there, helpless, while this thing, this impossible, hatal nightmare, just hovered and drooled on me for 10 solid minutes. 10 minutes. At 3 hours, 27 minutes, and 42 seconds, the mouth twitched. The edges of the slit crawled. In the camera's audio, I hadn't even realized there was audio until that moment. I heard the fibrous creak I'd heard in the room, magnified and close. The lower half of the slit shifted downward just a fraction. The line lengthened. It was like watching a snake unhinge in slow motion, just beginning. Not much, just enough that I understood that what I'd been seeing so far wasn't its mouth open. It was its mouth closed. The jaw, if that's what the lower arc was, sagged, testing its own range, then inched back up, resealing the slit into that thin, obscene smile. Then, with the same jerky grace it had arrived with, it folded back. The limbs retracted into the unseen bulk above the frame. The tongue slithered upward, vanishing into the slit. At 3:28, the last hint of its texture melted into a reasonable darkness, indistinguishable from the ceiling. At 3 hours, 28 minutes, and 4 seconds, my body jerked. I gasped, sat bolt upright, clutched my head. I watched the whole thing, both versions of myself. Then I ran to the tiny sink and vomited until I had nothing left. The proof I demanded was not a relief. It wasn't vindication. It was a fucking sentence. I couldn't blame misfiring neurons. I couldn't blame pressure headaches or cabin fever. Something had been in my cabin. Something that didn't flood it, didn't crush it, didn't displace air or water the way it should. Something that just pushed through the boundaries like they were suggestion. Something from outside, from below, from that screaming black nowhere our hydrophones pointed at every goddamn day. I barely made it to my next shift. Moon took one look at me and said, "Jesus, you find a mirror down here or what?" I recorded it, I said. Recorded what? I slid the tablet over. He watched in silence, expression flat. We hit the drip at 3:17. He flinched when the first limb came down. "Is this a joke?" he asked, voice tight. "Does it look like a joke?" He watched to the end, through my own little on-screen spasm, then jabbed the pause icon. "How do you render this?" he said. "It's raw feed. Bullshit. This is a model. You got some AR overlay, or why the hell would I spend my off hours making found footage horror when I can't even sleep?" He glanced up at me, then back at the screen. His throat bobbed. There was a conflict in his eyes, oiled over with exhaustion. The need to dismiss it warred with the fact that he couldn't quite find the seam. "You show toe?" he asked. "Yeah." He says I'm stressed. He's not wrong. "Hoon." He scrubbed back and forth through the clip, squinting at edges, at pixels, at compression artifacts. "There's no source for it," he muttered. "No hatch opening. No door. It just shows up. The ceiling doesn't deform. That's not how physics works. No cheat." He set the tablet down, rubbed his face. "Look," he said, "you know they're not going to take this seriously. Even if it's real, especially if it's real. You start telling command that something from outside is doing limbo through the hull into your bunk. We all get flagged for evaluation. This whole module gets labeled compromised. We're all going up on the next rotation, maybe permanently, and nobody gets their bonuses. Nobody gets data. This base disappears into a classified file, and we both get NDAs up our asses. So," I said, "we're not supposed to be here anyway. The trench doesn't give a shit about our grants." "I'm saying," he said, jabbing a finger at me, "you're not the only one down here. You drag us all into your personal haunt. There are consequences. For us. Not for your whatever that is. So what do you want me to do?" "Ignore it. Sleep in the acoustics bay. Swap bunks. Record another night. See if it repeats. Maybe it's some glitch. Maybe someone's fucking with you. This is a confined environment. People do stupid shit for laughs. You think someone put on a latex monster suit, shadow phased through the ceiling, and drooled on my head for 10 minutes? He grimaced. "I don't know what I think. I know I don't want to have this conversation in the middle of the goddamn control room." He picked up the tablet, turned it off, and shoved it back at me. "Delete it," he said softly. "For now. Just for now. Keep this to yourself until you have more than that. You start a panic, we all drown in paperwork or worse." I didn't delete it. I did keep it to myself. Mostly. The next few nights, I didn't sleep in my bunk at all. I took advantage of the flexible shift culture down here. The way time stops meaning much, the way everyone's always half on duty, and napped in chairs at consoles and storage alcoves, anywhere but that narrow coffin of a bed. The paralysis didn't come, but I couldn't avoid it forever. Sleep always wins. The body always betrays the mind. On the third day of my vigil, I nearly face-planted into the sonar array. Toe cornered me by the coffee machine. "You're non-functional," he said. "You're racking up mistakes. You're a liability." That's one way to say good morning. "I'm adjusting your schedule," he said. "Mandatory 8 hours rack time. No more consecutive shifts. And I'm requesting a psych consult topside." Fantastic. Maybe they'll send a priest while they're at it. "Layla, do you smell it?" I asked him, stepping in. "When you walk past my cabin, do you smell anything?" He blinked. There was a flicker I recognized because I'd seen it in the mirror. The moment before you lie and the moment you tell the truth. The little hitch. "No," he said. He was lying. I went back to my bunk that night, like a condemned prisoner walking the long corridor. The towel was there, folded. The camera watched from the corner. The emergency strip glowed its steady red. I lay down, fully clothed, boots and all. If I could move, I wanted that advantage. The idea made me laugh, an ugly, dry little sound. Like steel-toed boots were going to help if I tried to bite my head off. I didn't even remember falling asleep. I only remember the smell. Stronger this time. A tide of electric cave air pouring over me. The hum was already there when I woke into the paralysis, thrumming against my spine, vibrating the fillings in my teeth. The station's sounds were gone. Nothing but that tone and the soft glug 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 of something wet, too close. My body was a mannequin again. I could feel the weight of my boots, the press of the mattress springs. My eyes were locked on the overhead. The patches of rust I'd named over the months seemed darker, as if something behind them was leaning forward. The first drop hit, colder than before, sharp like ice water. Same spot, hairline right temple. It cut a trail through my skin like a snail. Another. The interval between them was shorter, like whatever was secreting them was more excited. I could feel chill soaking through my t-shirt at the shoulder, too, even though nothing touched me there. Like proximity alone was lowering the temperature. The fibrous creak was loud enough now that I could tell it wasn't just one thing moving. It was a chorus, multiple strands of something under tension, adjusting, stretching. In the dark behind my eyes, my imagination went wild. I pictured that slit yawning wider, bones separating, this whole horrific head blooming open like a deep-sea flower over me. Above the fear, another feeling bubbled up. Rage. You picked the wrong girl, I thought. You picked the wrong habitat. I don't know how long it lasted. Time and paralysis isn't like normal time. Every second feels like being held under. Eventually, some internal threshold got crossed, some unknown chemical hit whatever receptor it needed to, and the cache shattered. I bolted upright with a scream already ripping out of me, chest heaving like I'd been sprinting. The room felt empty. Too empty. Like the absence had a shape. The towel under my head was soaked this time. I peeled it off and dropped it into the sink. The liquid on it gleamed amber in the dim light. It clung to the fabric instead of soaking through, each drop holding its shape like resin. My hair was plastered to the right side of my skull. My skin burned where it touched, like I'd been sitting in cold wind. I didn't go to the medic. I didn't go to Hoon. I went straight to my tablet. The camera had done its job. Another motion flag pulsed in the timeline. 3:12 this time. Earlier. I pressed play. The descent was quicker, less hesitant. The limbs that unfolded into the frame moved with a familiarity that made my stomach twist. Practice. It had done this more than the times I remembered, more than the times I'd recorded. The head came down, that stretched, eyeless thing, and stopped inches above my face on the screen. It didn't hover politely this time. The mouse slit flexed and then tore itself open. I heard the sound through the tinny little speaker, a long, tearing creak like wet canvas being slowly ripped. The lower arc sagged down, until the jaw hung almost perpendicular to the rest of the head. The IR showed only black inside. Not gray, not noise. Black. A hole. The tongue, if that's what the rope was, slid out and thickened, widening as if more of it poured into itself from wherever it came. The drool wasn't beads anymore. It was a stream. It poured over my forehead, down my temple, pooling in my hair. On screen, I didn't move. My chest rose and fell in tiny hitches, barely visible under the blanket. The thing's non-face filled the frame now, the gash of its mouth opened wider than my shoulders. It was big enough, I realized with distant horror, to sheath my entire head and neck. It held there. Just held. For the duration of the episode, whatever that span of horror was in real time, it stayed in that position. A living, breathing aperture poised over me, bathing me in its secretion like it was marinating me. When my sleeping self finally gasped and jerked, the thing didn't flinch. It didn't snap away like a startled animal. It didn't do anything sudden. It closed its jaw, slowly, methodically. The lower arc lifted, reseating itself along the upper. The slit thin again. Then, for the first time, it turned. Not its whole body, just the head. The long neck, or whatever structure supported it, twisted with a series of tiny jerks until the blank, eyeless depressions faced the camera. As if it had just noticed the little IR diode all this time. It held there. I stared at my own tablet, at that eyeless face staring straight back, and I felt something rupture in me. Some last assumption. The thing was not just aware of me. It was aware that I was trying to watch it from outside the paralysis. It leaned slightly toward the camera. The image glitched, a cluster of pixels tearing and reforming around its outline. Like the data couldn't quite cope with what it was seeing. Then it didn't climb back up or slide away. It thinned. The gray that defined its edges faded inwards, as if it was stepping sideways into a thinner layer of reality. A peel of shadow folding back against the hull. At 3 hours, 24 minutes and 9 seconds, it was gone. This time, I didn't throw up. I sat there, tablet hot in my hands, watching the frozen last frame of my empty bunk. Somewhere in the habitat, water glugged through pipes. A pump switched on. Metal ticked as it cooled. Behind it all, very faint, I thought I heard something else. A knock. It came from below. One sharp tap. Felt more than heard, like someone had rapped a knuckle against the underside of the module hull. 5 miles down where no diver, no sub, no sane thing could possibly be. Then another. Softer, like it wanted to make sure I'd heard. I stared at the ceiling like it might answer me. Then the knock came again. Not loud. If you weren't listening, you'd chalk it up to thermal expansion or some idiot dropping a wrench 3 compartments over. But I've been listening for days. My whole nervous system was a taut wire. 3 distinct taps from under my mattress. Impossible because under my mattress was a thin sheet of steel and then 20 centimeters of insulation and structure, and then nothing until you hit the exterior hull, and then 7 miles of black water. I was on my feet before I was really conscious of moving, bare fingers dragging along the seam where the bunk's steel plate met the wall. Cold. Condensation slicked my skin, even though the environmental system said humidity was at 60%. I pressed my ear to the metal. For a second, there was only my own breathing. Then, very faint, like someone whispering through a wall of stone, a hum, lower than anything the pumps made, vibrated through my skull. I jerked back. "Fuck this," I said aloud. I grabbed my tablet, jammed bare feet into my boots, and slammed the hatch open. The corridor outside hummed with the usual noises. Airflow, distant voices, the ever-present, low-grade groan of a structure under too much constant stress. No one stood outside. No one was pranking me with a sledgehammer and a grin. I half ran, half floated down the passage toward the control bay, banging my shoulder into a handhold. Poon was at the main sonar console, one ear of his headset on, eyes locked to the screen. The blue-white waterfall of the live feed slid endlessly downward. He glanced back as I came in. "You're off shift." "Something hit the hull," I said. He frowned, tapped a few keys, pulled up a different display. The structural sensors, strain gauges, accelerometers. A tangle of lines dancing around baseline. When, he asked. I looked at the tablet's frozen timestamp in my hand. 3 hours, 24 minutes, and 9 seconds. 10 minutes ago. He rolled back the feed, lips moving as he tracked time with his finger. Nothing, he said. Run it again. He did, slower. There were micro tremors, the constant, tiny flexes of metal underload. But no spikes, no sudden impact signatures. That's wrong, I said. He didn't argue that. He just didn't look at me. What about the hydrophones? I said, anything off? He toggled, brought up the recording that had been running since we dropped anchor months ago. A compressed booklet of ocean sound, all nights and days folded together. He scrubbed to 324, hit play. The usual, faint distant rumble of some storm god tantrum playing out in the shallows 5 miles up. A few clicks and creaks from our own noise. The ever-present, low-frequency moan of the earth doing its tectonic breathing. Then, woven into it, a pattern. It was so subtle I wouldn't have recognized it if I hadn't seen the earlier anomaly. A cluster of pulses, very soft, buried in the noise. Not echoes. There was no active ping, no impulse. Just pressure variations, like someone tapping on the water itself. 8 pulses. Pause. 3. Pause. I'm not good enough at code to know if that meant anything. My brain still tried to see meaning in it. What's that? I whispered. Could be harmonics from the riser. Hoon said automatically. Could be equipment. Could be whales. At 11,000 meters, I said. Sure. Whale rave in the abyss. He tore the headset off and dropped it on the console. What do you want me to say, Layla? His voice was sharp now. Edges showing. You're hearing knocks from the trench. The instruments say no. You've got horror movie footage from your bunk. Our systems say no. You smell thunder in a tin can at the bottom of the ocean. The medic says no. What answer do you actually want? The truth, I said. The truth is we're all too deep, too tired, and one bad day away from losing it. The truth is if there's something out there that can reach through 6,800 bars of pressure and come drool on your skull at night, there's not a goddamn thing we could do about it. So maybe the sane thing is to accept the more boring explanations and keep the lights on. He was breathing hard. He'd never raised his voice to me before. Did you hear it? I asked. He hesitated. Just a fraction. That's all I needed. Fine, he said. Yeah, I heard something. Probably nothing. I'm gonna log equipment noise and move on. He turned back to the console, hands suddenly very busy. When men on rigs or ships say probably nothing, what they usually mean is definitely something that I don't get paid enough to think about. I left before I said something I'd regret. The corridor back to the bunks smelled different. The baseline odors down here are constant. Hot wiring, metal, recirc air, human bodies. You stop sensing them unless they change. It's like living inside someone's breath. Halfway to my cabin, something else slid over all of that. Crisp, metallic dry. Ozone. It hit the back of my sinuses like cold smoke. I stopped dead. The overhead LEDs hummed. A telemetry unit somewhere ticked. Between one blink and the next, a bead of liquid swelled from a screw head in the ceiling above me. There was no pipe there, no joint, just a flat panel with a row of bolts. The bead grew, heavy, amber in the dirty light, then fell. It hit the back of my hand. Cold, thick, the same smell as my hair after an episode. Fuck you, I whispered at the ceiling. Another drop bulged from bare metal. No condensation film, no spreading moisture. Just a single, perfect sphere defying everything I knew about how water behaves. I didn't wait for it to fall. I moved. I didn't go back to my bunk. I went to the emergency escape pod. We call it the coffin. It's a squat cylinder bolted to the side of the main module, meant to take 4 people up in a worst-case scenario. Nobody likes being in it. It's cramped, the lighting is bad, the air is worse, and it smells like plastic and old fear. But it's isolated. Separate pressure shell. Separate systems. Its walls don't touch the walls of my cabin. If it wanted me, It'd have to work for it. I swiped my ID, squeezed through the hatch, and sealed it behind me. The air in the pod was cooler, quieter. The hum of the main hab faded to a distant memory. I climbed onto one of the contoured seats and sat there, knees bent to my chest, tablet pressed against my thigh. The tiny viewport showed nothing but black and the faint, particulate glitter of our own external lights reflecting on suspended silt. For the first time since this began, I let myself cry. Not the dramatic, movie kind with sobbing and snot. Just silent tears tracking down my cheeks, tasting like salt and metal when they ran onto my lips. I thought about jettisoning the pod right then, slapping the manual release, trusting the auto-ascent sequence, letting microbubbles strip my mind on the way up. Better embolism than having my head taken off by a trench thing. But there were protocols. You don't fire an escape pod for a bad dream and some weird drops. You don't abandon 3 other people to their fate because something's wrong with your personal evenings. You sit, you wait. You try not to listen to the ocean pressing against your tiny tin coffin. I must have dozed because at some point I shuddered and realized I'd lost time. The smell was there with me, stronger in the confined pod. Charged cave air, dry and damp at the same time. No, I said, out loud. Firm, like you talk to a dog trying to jump on the table. Nothing happened. No parálisis. My fingers still flexed, my toes twitched. I lifted my hand to my face. It was trembling so hard I didn't need any tools to know. I wasn't paralyzed. I wasn't frozen. Whatever sense I'd had of the thing following rules, only coming when I was pinned, only showing itself in the bunk, crumbled a little. You know that feeling when a plane drops a few feet in turbulence and your stomach thinks you're falling forever? Multiply that by 1,000. From somewhere in a main hab, a pump kicked on, its higher whine cutting through the pod's insulation. I clung to that noise like it was a lifeline. The familiar, mechanical, human-made sound. I waited. Nothing descended from the pod ceiling. No impossible limb extruded from the bulkhead. The smell eventually thinned. It had shown me it could find me anywhere on the station. It had chosen not to. Not yet. I slept in the pod for 2 nights. It didn't like that. On the 3rd night, late life shift, I was in the acoustics bay again, watching live hydrophone feeds for a scheduled active ping sequence. We rarely ping. It pisses off diploblobs and conservation committees. But once in a while we send a controlled pulse to check the array. The command came through. Hoon toggled the switch. The first ping rolled out. A clean, hard sound, audible even through thick walls and water, like a giant tapping a tuning fork 100 meters away. The feed lit up. The return traced along the screen in a curve you could set your watch by. Trench wall, slope, sediment. The second ping went out. The return came back wrong. Instead of a nice, continuous line, there was a gap. A vertical absence in the wall. A strip of space that refused to bounce anything back. Shadow zone. Hoon muttered, "That's new." We ran it again. Same thing. Trench wall, and then a notch of nothing that moved. Not much. Just a few meters closer with every ping. Could be a cloud of gas. Hoon said, too quickly. Or a shoal. At 11,000 meters, I said again. Sure. Sardine ball of the damned. Or it's a data error. On the 4th ping, the notch of nothingness had slid directly under our coordinates. The return off the hull. There's always a tiny echo, flickered. For a heartbeat, there was no signal. Nothing came back. I held my breath without meaning to. There's a weight to absence. An almost synesthetic sense of something being where there should be nothing, or nothing where there should be something. The hydrophone feed went sibilant, as if the sea itself had taken a breath in. Then the normal noise rushed back, like a crowd realizing the power was out, and then cheering when it flickered on. My tablet buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out with numb fingers. Camera, motion alert. 317. Of course. I have to check something, I said. Hoon grabbed my wrist as I turned. You're not leaving me with this. You told me it was data error. I snapped. Enjoy your glitch. His grip tightened. You think it's the same thing? Inside and out, Yes, I said. I think it's the same mouth from both sides. We stared at each other for a second, both of us breathing like we'd just run a marathon. Don't tell Toe, he said finally. Not yet. He'll shut all down. And if this is going to kill us, I want to know what it is when it happens. You're a sick bastard, I said. You're the one filming your own haunting. He let go. In my cabin, the air smelled like burnt rain. I sat on the bunk, tablet on my lap, thumb hovering over the notification. I almost didn't open it. Part of me thought, if I don't see it, it's not real. If I don't name it, it can't follow me. Then the rational part kicked in, the same part that had dragged me into this in the first place. I was a scientist, once, before I became a petrified specimen on a table. So I opened a clip. For the first minute or so, it was nothing new. Me, a pale lump under the blanket. The shift at 3:16 when my body went from loose to statue. The first suggestion of darker dark pushing into the frame. But this time, something else appeared before the creature did. A shimmer. A vertical line running down the center of the image, like bad tape in an old VHS. The pixels on either side didn't match up. They seemed to lag, like they were being dragged through molasses. The line widened. It was as if the camera were trying to film a heat haze in the middle of a fridge. Then the limbs came through. Long knotted, jointed all wrong. The head followed, that awful stretch drop shape. It looked more present this time. Less like a shadow, more like a thing forcing itself into focus. The mouth hung slightly open. Drool already streamed. As it lowered itself into position above my face, I heard something new in the clip's audio. Under the earlier creak and wet gurgle, a sound like distant pinging. Not our ping, a different pattern, irregular, faster. I realized with a little jolt that the camera was picking up the active sonar sequence from the same night. The pings Hoon and I had sent rolling into the trench. The thing above me reacted to each one. On the waveform, tiny spikes. Its body twitched in time with the sound, almost imperceptible flinches, like it was being lit by something only it could feel. When a notch of nothing had slid under our coordinates externally, the thing had been halfway through unhinging its jaw internally. The inside and the outside were synchronized. I watched, morbidly fascinated, as the mouth yawned open. Wider, wider, the slit deforming, revealing that impossible gullet of black. There was no data glitch this time. No pixel smear. Whatever reluctance the universe had about showing me this had been worn down. I saw all the way in. There was no texture, no sroutrigis, no glistening wetting sides. Just depthless dark, like someone had opened a door in its head into the trench itself. The jaw froze at its full gape. My entire head could fit in there. My shoulders, almost. It was like looking into a deep vent hood, the kind above industrial stoves, except this one wanted to inhale me. It hovered there as my oblivious sleep self lay beneath it, soaked in its secretion. On the audio, the sonar pings faded. The returns normalized. The notch moved on, back down into deeper, quieter dark. The thing's trembling eased. Then, slowly, carefully, it began to close its jaw. The lower arc lifted, the slit narrowing until it was just a line again. It didn't leave immediately. It lingered, twisted, and turned toward the camera, just like before. Only this time, it didn't just tilt its head. It leaned in. The eyeless depressions filled the frame. The slit of the mouth flexed, the edges wrinkling like something amused. It stayed like that long enough that the IR sensor began to bloom, white noise creeping around its outline like it was burning the image into the hardware. When it finally withdrew, it didn't fade at the edges. It receded, pulling itself straight back up until the last thing the camera saw was the tip of that impossible tongue sliding back inside. Then it was gone, and my body jerked awake 6 seconds later. If I'd had any illusions left that this thing was unaware of being watched, that it was just some blind reflex organism operating on ancient instinct, they died right there. It knew. It was exploring the limits of whatever rules had let it in. testing my tools like I was testing it, like we were both standing at a window between worlds, tapping the glass. The metaphor hit me while I was sitting there, fingers numb on the tablet. My whole life, people had described chronic anxiety to me like drowning, flailing in the dark, pulled under by waves. That wasn't quite right. This thing didn't come screaming out of nowhere, teeth bared, hunting in rage. It took its time. It watched. It drooled. It let its fear leak into me in a slow, steady drip until my whole nervous system smelled like food. It wasn't an eater of flesh. Not yet. It was an eater of stillness. It came when my body was pinned, when I was trapped in my own skeleton, when my awareness and helplessness were both at their absolute peak. I thought the paralysis was the prison keeping me from escaping it. But what if it was the marinade? What if my immobilized terror was the seasoning it needed, the brine that softened me enough to swallow? It wasn't practicing its jaw for fun. It was measuring, preparing for the day it finally dropped that awful head low enough and wide enough and just took me. When that thought set in, everything else got very, very simple. There was no more negotiating with Toe about Rem Adonia. No more half-joking with Hoon at the console. My choices were, sleep and be eaten eventually, or don't sleep and die in other, more mundane, less incomprehensible ways. I went with option 2. For 3 days, I did not lie down. Not once. I drank coffee until my hand were a blur. I stole stim patches from the emergency kit. My heart hammered constantly in my throat. The station blurred around the edges. At some point, Toe cornered me outside the galley and jammed his finger into my chest. "You're going to give yourself a stroke," he snapped. "You think the thing you think you saw is bad? Wait until you feel your own heart pop like a balloon." "I'm fine," I said, blinking. The overheads were a little too bright. His face seemed slightly mislabeled. "You're not fine," he said. "You miscalculated a decompression schedule this morning." Hoon caught it. If he didn't, 2 divers would be in bubbles right now. You think whatever's in your nightmares is worse than killing your friends because you're scared of your pillow. His words cut through the stimulant fog. Cold, brutal, effective. "I can't sleep," I said. It came out small. It was the first honest thing I'd said to him in weeks. "Yes, you can," he said. "You just won't. If this is stress, you have to address it. If it's something else," he hesitated. His eyes flicked just for a second to the side toward nothing. "You smell it," I said. "Sometimes," he admitted. "The ozone thing. In the corridors. Nobody wants to talk about it, but we're all on edge. There's been dreams, shared themes. I'm logging all of it. But until I have something I can put in a report that doesn't make us all sound like we're swallowing our own shit, I have to treat this as what it is on paper." "And what is it on paper?" "A crew member who hasn't slept more than an hour in 3 days," he said, "who is now officially unsafe to continue on mission-critical tasks. I'm pulling you from watch." "You can't." "I can," he said. "I'm also filing for early evac for you." "That's not scheduled for another." "I know when rotation is," he snapped. "I also know we have a perfectly functional coffin and a support vessel topside. You're not the only one who can do math. I can get you on the next resupply run. You can talk to a therapist who doesn't live in a haunted sardine can. You can see the sky. The idea of leaving should have been a relief. Instead, my stomach clenched. "What if it's not the station?" I said. "What if it's me it's attached to?" "You're not that special," he said automatically, but his eyes didn't match the tone. "I have footage," I said. "You can see." "I don't want to see it," he said quickly. Too quickly. "I've seen enough of this place in my own dreams." "Look, Layla, you're sliding into something bad. Even if you're right about whatever this is, you staying here isn't going to save anyone. It's just going to break you." "I'm already broken," I said. He let his hand fall from my chest. For a second, he looked old. Older than the years we'd all been down here. "Then let someone else do the breaking for a while," he said. "Pack a bag." The evac wasn't dramatic. No alarms, no klaxons, just a quiet little ritual we'd practiced a dozen times. I climbed into the coffin with 2 other crew, an engineer with a ruptured eardrum, and a biologist who'd gotten a nasty chemical burn. We didn't look at each other much. The hatch sealed, the clamps released. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the pod shuddered as it detached from the habitat and started its ascent. The sensation is weird. Not launch, not flight, just a steady, almost stately rise. The pressure outside drops, the pod creaks and compensates. You feel it in your teeth, like cavities singing. I watched the tiny porthole. The halo of the habitat lights dropped away, shrinking to a star in the dark. Beyond that, nothing but ink. There's a point in the rise where, if you've done it enough, you know you're crossing out of the Hadal zone proper. The pressure is still insane, but the geology changes, the water masses shift. It's like passing an invisible border. I felt in my gut. Right then, the pod shivered. Not from outside. This wasn't pressure creep. It felt like something had brushed the outer shell. A long, slow caress, running from the lower rim up past my shoulder. The injured biologist flinched. "Did you feel that?" The engineer grunted. "Microcurrent." I didn't say a thing. The pod's onboard instruments pinged happily. "No hui brichis, no straccirelenamidis." But the air in the pod changed just for a second. The faint smell of hydraulic fluid and old sweat was drowned by something sharp and electric and dry. Then it was gone. We broke the thermocline. The water got warmer. The ascent sped up. We popped the surface hours later, recovered by the support vessel's crane. The hatch cracked open to a flood of daylight and real wind. I squinted, eyes watering. The sky was a raw blue smear overhead. The ocean around us glittered, flat and endless, the ship's wake cutting it into white and gray. It should have felt like resurrection. It felt like surfacing from a dream into another dream that had better lighting. They gave me a bunk on the support ship, metal again, but painted white. The walls didn't sweat. They creaked in time with waves instead of pressure shifts. The air smelled like salt and diesel and frying onions instead of brine and plastic. That first afternoon, after the obligatory debrief, "No, sir, I don't feel homicidal." "Yes, sir, I understand this rotation has been unusually stressful." "No, sir, I do not have any concrete safety concerns about the station's design." I went to my cabin, closed the door, and stared at the bunk. There was a porthole here too. It showed a slice of gray-blue sea, sun sparking on the chop. I could hear water slapping the hull, the steady creak of metal flexing, the distant thrum of engines. I told myself, here you can sleep. The thing lives in the trench. It's a pressure phantom, a deep glitch. You left its territory. You got away. I lay down. For the first time in days, my eyes closed out of something like actual tiredness instead of fear. I woke up an hour later with my heart punching my ribs. Not paralyzed, not pinned, just awake. The cabin was dimmer, the sun having slid past the porthole. The light that came through now was softer, greenish, filtered by the surface chop. The air smelled like ozone. I swore very quietly. I reached up, hands shaking, and touched my hair at the right temple. Wet, not sweat wet, not damp from the pillow. Wet with that same thick, slightly sticky texture, cooling my skin in a narrow band. I rolled out of the bunk and staggered into the cramped head. The mirror over the sink showed me a face slightly less corpse-like than in the habitat, but the hair on one side clung in dark strands to my skull. I pinched my fingers along it and brought them up. 2 amber smudge droplets. Metallic, cave-lined, sharp. I laughed. It sounded insane, thin and rising. 6 miles up from its nest, and it had still found me. Of course it had. You don't spend weeks drooling on a meal and practicing your bite just to let it get away because of a few atmospheres. That's when I understood the last piece. The trench wasn't the prison. It was the gallery. The whole ocean was. Every submerged space humans had ever made, submarines, wrecks, habitats, hulls, were little frames hanging in its private museum. Little rectangles of still air where we lay trapped in our own bodies every night, ripe and helpless. Our sleep paralysis, Our dreams where we sank and couldn't move, our nightmares of being pinned and watched. They weren't malfunctions. They were visitations. All this time, it had been studying us, learning the thickness of our skulls, the tensile strength of our fear, experimenting with pressure and dimension and the physics of edges until it could push through not just steel, but whatever thin membranes separated the way it existed from the way we did. The trench wasn't where it lived. The trench was where it learned. I didn't sleep again until we hit port. We docked at Guam 5 days later. The ship slid into the harbor with all the slow, deliberate grace of something that knows it could crush anything smaller than it without noticing. The familiar land world noises flooded in. Gulls screaming, forklifts beeping, the chatter of dock workers, the clank of chains and gangways. I stepped onto the pier and felt the solid, unmoving concrete under my boots. It should have felt final. A line drawn between below and above, between before and after. I still smelled ozone. They put us up in a shore facility, modest rooms, white walls, actual windows. Mine looked out over the harbor. The water was calm, dappled with boat wakes. In the distance, the open Pacific was a darker band. I watched it from the little couch, knees pulled up until my vision fuzzed. I tried every trick from a decade of insomnia. TV on, TV off, white noise app, silence. Herbal tea, no caffeine afternoon. Lights on, lights off. Changing the angle of the bed relative to the window, like that might confuse a thing that lived in geometry. Nothing mattered. At some point, inevitably, my body pulled the plug on the day. I woke at 3:17 a.m., staring at the ceiling. Not paralyzed. Every muscle worked. My tongue moved in my mouth when I cursed. My hands flexed under the sheet. For a second, I thought, maybe it can't reach me on land. Maybe the smell is just in my head. Then I felt it. Not on my temple, on my cheek. A drop fell from nowhere and landed just under my right eye, close enough to the lower lid that if I'd been asleep it might have slid straight in. Ice cold. Thick. My eyes snapped sideways of their own accord, to the corner of the room where the ceiling met the wall. Just a blank intersection of paint and plaster. I could move. I could get up. I could scream, turn on every light, run into the corridor, out onto the street, into the ocean itself if I wanted. Wasn't playing by the old rules anymore. Whatever door the paralysis had opened was now jammed. It had used that state as a training wheel, a way to slip into my awareness without too much turbulence. Now it had my signature. Now it could find me awake. I spent the rest of the night sitting in the shower, hot water pounding over my head, because for some reason it felt less obscene to wash something's drool into a drain. The next day, 4 p.m., bright sunlight slanted into the room, cutting a line across the floor. I dragged the chair into it and sat there, letting the warmth soak into my legs. I'm telling you this now because it feels like cheating to only tell the story if I make it through. There's a part of me that still wants to believe the old explanations, that wants to take Toe's pre-printed pamphlets on REM autonia and say, yes, I had a textbook case, that wants to let some nice woman in glasses tell me my brain misfires sometimes and my fear constructs tall, drooling monsters to make sense of the static. That part of me does not have a damp patch of hair that never quite dries, no matter how many times I wash it. It doesn't carry the smell of thunder and cave rock around like a personal weather front. It doesn't hear knocks from under the world when it tries to fall asleep. The other part does. The part that sat in that steel box 6.5 miles down and watched something climb out of nowhere into my bunk on infrared. The part that watched it widen its mouth night after night like someone stretching a bag over a shape, trying to get the fit right. I can feel it like a pressure change when rooms get quiet, in the hum of air conditioners, in the way dripping faucets hesitate between drops, like they're listening for something worse. It's patient. That's the worst of it. It's not chasing me down hospital corridors or popping out of mirrors. It's waiting. It's done tasting. It's done practicing. Every drop it ever let fall on my skin was data. Every time it pinned me, and listen to my little trapped heart smash itself against my ribs was calibration. It knows my edges now. If I go back under, if I take another trench contract, another submarine run, another deep sea, anything, I don't think it'll wait. I think the second my body locks up, the second I feel that familiar cast slam down, it'll put that mouth over my whole head and just close. I picture it sometimes. My face going dark. My scream cut off not by lack of air, but by a sudden, crushing pressure from all sides, like biting into a grape. My brain going from organized terror to scattered slurry in half a second. Clean, efficient, finally getting to take the bite it's been rehearsing. But I don't think it has to wait for that anymore. That was the training environment. Now the environment is me. I can feel in the walls here. In the hotel, in the airport, in my little rented apartment 5 blocks from the beach. In the hum of the fridge. In the silence between passing cars. I keep imagining waking up one night and not being paralyzed. I'll roll over, angry and tired, and it will be there, unfolded from the corner like a piece of shadow that found an extra dimension. Its mouth will hang open, the black inside somehow deeper than the dark behind it. I'll be able to move. I'll be able to run, kick, claw at it. I'll be able to scream, and for the first time, other people will hear it coming from my throat instead of just echoing inside my skull. And it will close that distance in one smooth, practiced movement and slip my whole upper body into that impossible gullet like a hand into water. Because I'm not sleeping at the bottom of the ocean anymore. I'm sleeping at sea level, in a town that lives off surfers and tourists and boats. Every drain, every pipe, every fucking glass of water is aligned back to its world. The gallery was never about that one habitat. It was about all of us lying still night after night in little air pockets scattered over a water planet, thinking we're alone in our own heads. I'm in a sunbeam right now. I can hear seagulls and traffic and kids at the public pool 3 blocks away. There are sprinklers hissing in the courtyard. My neighbor's shower is running through the wall. It doesn't matter. The damp spot on my hair is cold against my skull. It smells like my future. Sleep always wins. Eventually, your body betrays you. You can hold out for days, weeks, but at some point something inside you flips and you go under whether you want it or not. I know that when I go back to the gallery, whether that gallery is a bunk on a station, a cabin on a ship, or a bed in an apartment a 5-minute walk from the shore, it won't bother courting me with paralysis. It'll let me move. It'll let me scream. And its jaw is now wide enough to fit.